Well, welcome. Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic should be a topic on everyone's table, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What I do know is that one of the topics that we are discussing is America's birthday. So our table topic is we are not a democracy, but what are we? Declaring that we are not a democracy is only the first step. Correctly stating that we are a representative constitutional republic means nothing if we don't actually understand what that means as well. We easily point out the difference between a democracy and a republic, but do we truly understand the core of what a republic is? To say happy birthday to America on this historic 250th anniversary requires us to look back. We have to recalibrate. I think that the country is at a point where we're not at a fork in the road, but it's almost like we're not firing on all cylinders. We have to understand what the original America was like so that we can clearly see where we've gone wrong, as well as how we can get back on track. Because we cannot defend what we do not understand, and we cannot restore what we cannot define. For too long, we have treated the original plan of our government like a museum exhibit, like a dusty, historic relic to be admired from behind the glass rather than an active operating system of our liberty. But a blueprint is not a piece of nostalgia, it is a standard of measurement. When a structure begins to warp or crack, you don't look at the crooked walls to fix it. You return to the original foundation. So, properly understanding the founder's design is not an exercise in academic trivia, it is a necessity. Without the original blueprint, we completely lose the ability to recognize how far we have drifted. We normalize the overreach. We mistake the heavy hand of bureaucracy for the protective shield of the law. 250 years into this grand experiment, knowing the original plan is the only way that we can accurately diagnose what I believe is broken today. It gives us the vocabulary to challenge entrenched power, the legal authority to demand strict accountability, and the clarity to see exactly where legitimate governance ends and where tyranny begins. And if we do not know what the machine was built to do, we have no right to complain when it is weaponized against us. We must know the blueprint because you cannot guard a republic if you don't even know what you are defending. So this show is dedicated to exposing some of the aspects of our modern government that operate every single day, but were never intended to be here by design. You'll hear straight from our forefathers as we outline these changes. And before we go into those key items that has shaped our government away from its original intent, I got to start by highlighting what this country has accomplished because you must understand why and what we are protecting. And if we're going to turn this country around, get it back on track, recalibrate, it starts by knowing what are we fighting for? Because America is not the greatest nation on earth because we are flawless. We are the greatest nation because we possess a mechanism of self-correction unmatched in human history. We are a nation founded not on a shared bloodline, a dominant tribe, or an ancient crown, but on a radical proposition that individual liberty is a gift from God and that the state is merely its servant. You see, our history is not a sanitized fairy tale. It's pretty ugly. We have some issues. It contains some deep and agonizing scars. We inherited the ancient global evil of slavery, a blight that plagued humanity for a millennia. But while other empires accepted human bondage as the natural order, America did something unprecedented. Through our economic struggle, we strangled slavery out. Not to mention, we engaged in a brutal, agonizing civil war that assisted in the purging of that sin from our nation's soul. We codified its abolition into our fundamental law, marched through the fire of the civil rights movement, and proved to the world that our founding principles were strong enough to bend the arc of history towards justice. We did not bury our faults. We overcame them using the very blueprint our founders left behind. To this day, we know about what happened 400 years ago because as a country, we do not hide our past. We overcome it. I want you to look at the engine that powers this nation, the free market capitalistic system. No economic system in human history has lifted more people out of absolute poverty, sparked more staggering innovation, or generated more prosperity than the American economy. It is the ultimate vessel of the American dream, the unique promise that your destiny is determined by your drive, by your sweat, by your merit, rather than the station of your birth. So you can start wherever your starting place is, but through drive, through sweat, through merit, through hard work, you can achieve. This country came from a desolate wilderness. And with American capitalism, we were able to build the modern world. We are the nation that conquered polio, lit up the darkness with the incandescent bulb, engineered the internet, and explored the moon. We pioneered a society where a citizen can fiercely criticize their president without fear of penalty, and where freedom of faith and of speech are guarded as sacred rights. For 250 years, the world has bet against us, have bet against this experiment. And for 250 years, they have lost. America remains the beacon of the world because our story is one of relentless resilience. A nation that acknowledges its past, unleashes the unlimited potential of its people, and continuously refines the outer limits of human achievement. You see, the greatness of America isn't maintained by blind praise. We have a lot to be excited about. I'm sure hearing all of those wins excites you. But the greatness of America is maintained through fierce vigilance. But right now, we have to confront a hard and undeniable truth that we have drifted dangerously far from the original intent of our design. And if we want to keep this republic, if we want our country to remain strong, we have to be brave, brave enough to acknowledge exactly what we've gotten wrong. So when we come back, we're going to look in the mirror. We're going to break down some critical areas where our government has gone off the rails, and we're going to highlight what we must address if we've ever have any hope at restoring the American promise. We're just getting started. Happy birthday, America. Happy birthday to all of us Americans who continue to fight for this country, to work in this country, to defend this country, and to all the patriots out there. We're just getting started. Happy birthday. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't leave the table. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. In today's table topic, we are talking about the fact that this country is not a democracy. But what are we? It's not enough to just say that. Declaring that we are a representative constitutional republic means nothing if we don't actually understand what that means. You cannot guard a republic if you don't even know what you're defending. And far too long, we have treated our founding blueprint like a dusty museum relic rather than the active operating system of our liberty. But when a structure begins to warp and crack, you don't look to the warped and cracked walls. You gotta look at the original foundation. As I stated in the first segment, America is the greatest nation on earth, not because we are flawless, but because we possess a mechanism of self-correction unmatched in human history. We are a nation built on a radical proposition that individual liberty is a gift from God and that the state is merely its servant. But greatness is not maintained by blind praise. It is not preserved by weak men and women. It is only preserved through fierce vigilance. And right now, we have to confront a hard truth, an undeniable truth, but a hard one. And that's that we have drifted dangerously far from the original intent of our design. And if we want to keep this republic, we have to be brave enough to acknowledge exactly what we've gotten wrong. So now it's time to look in the mirror. Unfortunately, the list is long when it comes to the ways that we've slipped away from our original design of this country. But there are a few items that I believe are the most important. So first up, something that we're doing, now these are all things that we're currently doing right now in this country that is so far away from the country's founding fathers' original intent. Things that they did not want us to do for very specific reasons. So it's important to know what those things are so that when it's time to do better, we can. So first, we got to talk about this rise of the administrative state or bureaucracy. You see, today, a sprawling alphabet soup of federal agencies like the EPA, the SEC, the ATF, all these things exercise massive control over American life. They write the rules, they enforce the rules, and then they penalize you in their own internal courts. They act as lawmakers, police officers, the judge, and the jury all rolled into one. This is the exact structural nightmare our forefathers fought a revolution to prevent. You see, in Federalist Paper number 47, James Madison laid down an uncompromising warning. Here's what he said: the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. He said, creating these structures, these accumulation of power, remember, the judge, the jury, the executioner, all the things, that accumulation of power is the very definition of tyranny. Madison didn't say it might lead to tyranny. He said that it is tyranny. You see, the founders designed a system where power was strictly fractured, ensuring no single entity could ever hold absolute control over a free people. We have clearly stepped away from this original intent. And by abandoning the blueprint, we have allowed an unaccountable fourth branch of government to rule. This has stripped away the foundational promise of our republic, which is accountability. If you disagree with a law passed by Congress, you can vote them out. But how do you vote out a permanent bureaucrat when an unelected manager can alter your livelihood or restrict your rights with a stroke of a pen? Your vote is effectively neutralized. We have traded the protective shields of the Constitution for the heavy hand of bureaucratic overreach. And normalizing the exact form of governance our founders warned would destroy our liberty, so shrinking our government is actually more American than expanding it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we need to do. Shrink the government. So next, let's talk about unilateral executive orders. You see, whenever Congress gridlocks, modern presidents routinely step into the vacuum, and with a stroke of a pen, they issue expansive executive orders to unilaterally dictate sweeping domestic, immigration, and environmental policies for the entire nation. This is a complete betrayal of the executive power defined by our founding fathers. In Federalist Paper number 69, Alexander Hamilton went to great lengths to reassure a terrified public that the American president will never resemble the British king. Hamilton explicitly argued that while the King of England could make laws on his own authority, the president's power would be strictly limited to executing laws already passed by Congress. You see, unilateral lawmaking from the Oval Office directly flouts this constraint. It hurts the country by destabilizing our legal framework and creating a system of temporary, hyperpartisan decrees. Instead of stable legislation, debated and passed by the people's representatives, our entire society swings like a pendulum every 4 years. And based on who occupies the White House, it will continue to swing like a pendulum. And by allowing the executive branch to bypass Congress, we have diluted the power of the citizen. And we have traded the constitutional republic for the whims of a single ruler. This happens on both sides of the aisle, guys. And we get excited when it happens on our side, but then we get mad when it happens on the other side. Maybe the reason why we keep fluctuating in emotions is because we're not supposed to have it at all. Now let's move on to the next one. The next topic is permanent political class, career politicians. You see, today, members of Congress regularly spend 30, 40, or even 50 years entrenched in Washington, transforming temporary public service into a lucrative lifelong career. I know this to be true because a wife of a current congressman here in Georgia told me, she looked me in my face and she said, "Yeah, I think we're going to do about another 10 years and then we're going to retire." I was like, wait, what? Now, both of you are in elected office. They're both elected to the seats that they're in. One is a county commissioner, the other's in Congress. And that was the conversation. Like she was telling me when they were going to leave. Not, well, if the people will have us, or, maybe. Nope, she was certain. That's crazy. This permanent political class completely violates the spirit of our founding. In Federalist Paper number 57, James Madison promised that representatives would be strictly restrained because they must always anticipate the moment when their power would cease, forcing them to, in James Madison's words, descend to the level from which they were raised. Meaning, go back home. And here's the thing. During this time, they didn't have a lot of modern technology and all that stuff. So farming and, agriculture was a big deal pretty much for everybody. So staying away from your home while your wife and kids are back there wasn't necessarily something that was a positive. It was a sacrifice. It was a huge sacrifice. So yeah, they looked forward to going back home after they served. And while the Federalists believed that regular elections would enforce this, the Anti Federalists explicitly warned in the Federal Farmer Letters that without a mandatory rotation in office, you're going to end up with disconnected, permanent, ruling, aristocratic rule that would inevitably form. The Anti Federalists were right. By allowing politicians to entrench themselves for decades, we have severed the vital connection between the rulers and the ruled, between the elected and the people. You see, career politicians become beholden to their special interests, corporate lobbyists, and the preservation of their own power, rather than the citizens they represent. This is happening not just on a federal level, it's also happening here on a state level. God bless them, but I spoke to a couple of state reps during this past special session. And the number of times their seat was raised in the conversation, in other words, the number of times I heard them say something like, "We're going to lose our seats," or, "Oh, but just so you know, if we don't, do something about this, we're going to lose our majority," or, "I got to protect my seat." And it was just crazy to me. I heard nothing about what the people want. And this was all because they were upset because, my husband made a huge statement about the whole redistricting thing and called them out. And I had to explain that the people are tired. They are tired of being told what to do, what not to do, when to do it. But then when we ask you to do something to represent us, you get pushback. But that's what happens when you have permanent elected officials who care more about maintaining their seat than they do the citizens that they represent. And to the credit of one, there was one state rep who said, "You know what, Janelle? If I got to hold on to the seat this tight, I probably should let it go." And I was like, yes. Yes. Let someone else do it. If it's not working out, if you're getting to the point where you're now maintaining a seat instead of doing what the will of the people is, you need to leave. And I actually admired that statement and I admire that thought process, and my respect for that person went up because of that. You see, we have traded the ideal of the citizen statesman for a ruling elite that is completely insulated from the reality of everyday American life. Ultimately, it cripples the representative nature of our republic. We have to have it. Look, if you're joining the show for the first time, I'm Janelle King, and this is the Janelle King Show, and we're discussing aspects of our government that we experience today, but is far from the founders' original intent. And the purpose is to get us back on track so that we can continue to maintain our republic. So continuing on, let's discuss another issue or another policy or position that we are now a part of as a country that was not the original intent of our forefathers. Direct individual income taxes. You see, today, the federal government levies a progressive tax directly on the wages of individual citizens, stripping money straight out of our paychecks before we ever see it. This is an invasive system that is exactly what the founders fought to avoid. Remember taxation without representation, the Boston Tea Party, the Stamp Act, all of this stuff was about overreach when it comes to taxes. In Federalist Paper number 21, Alexander Hamilton strongly argued that taxes on consumption, or like tariffs and duties, were the safest and fairest form of revenue because they contain a natural check against government overreach. Yeah, a consumption-based tax. Fair tax, by the way, but I digress. You see, if a tax was too high, people would simply stop buying the item. And then the government revenue would drop, which would then force them to regulate, the market to regulate. Hamilton viewed direct internal taxation as a dangerous, heavy-handed measure. This is why the original Constitution explicitly banned unappropriated direct taxes, requiring a massive constitutional shift from the 16th Amendment in 1913 to make the modern income tax legal. By abandoning this natural check, we have given Washington and the Washington elites an unlimited claim on the fruits of our labor. As if we're not already giving enough to this country, as if we're not already being taxed enough, now you're taking literally food off the table and money out of my pocket. It has fueled the exponential growth of a bloated federal apparatus that no longer has a restraint on its spending. Why would I keep a balanced budget? Why would the government actually have to spend efficiently when all they have to do is take more from you if they make mistakes? And then we hand it over freely because we have no choice at this point. Instead of a government being funded by what citizens choose to buy, we have a government funded by coercively taking what citizens have earned, turning the American worker into a default debtor to the state and eroding the financial independence vital to a free people. We are not free in this country if we don't have our own financial independence. This is why I'm not a fan of digital currency and local, global financial partnerships and all these things. So up next, let's talk about the next issue: deficits and generational debt. It feeds right into what we were just talking about with income taxes. The federal government now spends trillions more than it brings in annually. Now, does that make sense? Can you do that at home? I don't think so. Some people do, but it's a stressful life. And relying on a continuously climbing national debt to fund standard peacetime operations wasn't the original intent. This is reckless behavior. It's a complete rejection of the fiscal morality of our founding fathers. The founders viewed public credit as a tool preserved strictly for existential emergencies, not a blank check for everyday governance. In his 1796 farewell address, George Washington explicitly commanded future generations to avoid, in quote, the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts, not ungenerously throwing upon posterity and the burden. Don't throw it off on us. While things are calm, we're not at war, we don't have to do a lot of spending. George Washington said that is the time for us to look for ways to reduce our debt if we are in debt so that we can be strong. Thomas Jefferson went even further, writing that it is a violation of natural law for our generation to rack up debts and to force the next to pay them off. It's a problem, but that's what we've been doing. And see, by normalizing permanent peacetime deficits, we have committed a profound act of generational theft. We are mortgaging the freedom and the financial security of our children, our grandchildren, to fund the bloated overreach of the present. This runaway debt shackles our economy, fuels inflation, and leaves the nation profoundly vulnerable to external collapse. We have traded the responsible stewardship of a free republic for a mountain of liabilities, ensuring that the next generation inherits a dependency trap rather than an inheritance of liberty. I have a grandbaby who is 4 months old, and I think about this. What are we leaving behind? Where will she be in the next 2 decades? Where would our economy be? Well, lastly, at least for now, I've got to talk about this major issue. I said I was coming back to this when I mentioned global financial partnerships, and I mentioned, how our financial system and digital banking and all that stuff. We've got to talk about the fiat currency and central bank monopolies. You see, today, the American economy runs on the unbacked paper and digital fiat currency, controlled completely by a centralized banking monopoly called the Federal Reserve. You see, this system was not born from the Constitution. The Federal Reserve was engineered in absolute secrecy during a 1910 meeting right here in the state of Georgia on Jekyll Island, which happens to be one of my favorite places to go. If you haven't visited, you should go. And these group of elite cartel and Wall Street bankers and politicians all came together on Jekyll Island, and they birthed what has been called the Creature of Jekyll Island. That's actually a book. If you haven't read it, oh, you got to read it. You got to read it. It's going to change the way you see the Federal Reserve, our finances, everything that's happening, and it'll explain how we got here. You see, a private central banking monopoly masqueraded as a government entity, completely insulated from the American voter. This centralization is the exact financial tyranny the founders built this nation to prevent. Having witnessed the catastrophic hyperinflation of the unbacked continental dollar during the revolution, they deeply despise paper currency. You see, in Federalist Paper number 44, James Madison praised the strict constitutional ban on paper currency, railing against it as pestilent effects of paper money on the necessary confidence between man and woman, on the necessary confidence in the public councils, on the industry of morals of the people. In other words, he was extremely concerned that bringing in paper money. Now, mind you, what did we have before? We had coins, we had silver, gold, we had precious metals that had value. That's what we used to buy and sell and trade with. But then we brought in this flimsy, cheap paper that didn't have any value. And that was something that was really a concern for for James Madison during the founding of this country. To ensure this never happens again, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution explicitly stripped the power to emit unbacked bills of credit, recognizing only gold and silver as legal tenders for debts. By abandoning this hard money foundation and surrendering our currency to a centralized monopoly, we have inflicted an invisible wound on the American people. It has systemically destroyed the purchasing power of the dollar, robbing citizens of their savings through the hidden regressive tax of inflation. By allowing an unaccountable cartel to manipulate interest rates and to print money out of thin air, we have institutionalized a debt-driven system that rewards the politically connected while eroding the financial independent stability and moral fabric of our free society. Being able to just produce money rather than having to dig it out of the ground and then use those precious stones, those precious metals, we've weakened our society. Unfortunately, the list can go on and on. But all is not lost. Looking at these deviations from our founding blueprint can feel daunting. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like, man, we are never going to get it back, right? And it's easy to look at the overreach and the dead and the permanent political class and think that the American experiment has drifted too far away to be saved. But it hasn't, because the blueprint isn't destroyed. It is simply waiting to be enforced. Enforced by representatives that do what they say they're going to do, and by a free people, a society of people who hold them accountable to that. And we will vote you out and put someone new in, and vote you out and put in someone else, and vote you out and put in someone else as much as we want to until we get the person who's going to do what they say they're going to do. That is how this country is supposed to work. Recognizing where the walls have warped is only the first step towards restoring the foundation. Because we are a nation that's built on self-correction, and we are not a people who run from challenge. We are a people who rise to meet it. And that's why, as we head into our final segment, we're going to step out of the shadows of what is broken, and we're going to move into the light of what makes this nation truly unshakable and ways to protect the republic. So when we come back, we are closing the show on a happy note. Stay with us. Our tribute to this enduring American spirit is up next. You're listening to The Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't leave the table.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship and discipleship, and yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs318@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic: we are not a democracy, but what are we? If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome to the fight. If you missed the first part of the broadcast, you can hear the entire episode, the encore episode, this Sunday on Extra 106.3 at 9 a.m., and you can catch the full replay on YouTube later today. Also, find us at the Podcast Park or wherever you get your podcasts every single Tuesday. Now we have spent this show tracing the lines of our original blueprint of America and looking directly at where the structure of our nation has warped. We have exposed a few of the ways that our country has moved away from the original blueprint of America, such as the introduction of a permanent political class of career politicians. We talked about the unilateral executive orders and the rise of the administrative state or bureaucracy. We've looked at the heavy hand of direct income taxes and the generational theft of compounding national debt and the silent economic erosion driven by the central banking monopoly engineered over a century ago at Jekyll Island here in Georgia. But we do not map the cracks in the foundation to abandon the house. We map them so that we can know exactly how to rebuild it. And today, we lift our eyes above the fractures to say happy birthday to America. Happy 250th. 2.5 centuries ago, a radical group of people who were just fed up rebels, and enslaved people looked at the greatest empire on earth and declared that human liberty was not a privilege granted by a king, but it was a birthright granted by God. The men and women of 1776 did not just sign a piece of parchment. They signed away their safety. They knew the price of their defiance. They endured the bitter, blood-stained snow of Valley Forge. They watched their farms burn, their businesses ruined, their families displaced. They knowingly traded comfort for conflict and wealth for poverty, risking their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, so that we could stand here today as free American citizens. We owe them a debt that can never be fully repaid, but we can certainly honor it. It is vital that we properly understand and protect this republic, because liberty is never more than a generation away from extinction. It is not passed down in the bloodstream. It must be fought for. It must be protected and handed directly to the next generation. The Constitution is only as strong as the conviction of the people willing to enforce it. If we do not guard the machine of liberty, it will inevitably be weaponized by those who wish to rule us. So, to the patriots of the past, we thank you for giving us the greatest sanctuary of freedom the world has ever known. And finally, to the patriots of today, thank you. Thank you to everyday Americans who are investing their time, their hearts, and their hard-earned resources into this fight. Thank you to those who are speaking out in our school boards, researching the truth, educating their neighbors, standing firm in their communities. We know it's exhausting. We know that so much of what you do goes unseen. We know that fighting for what is right is often unappreciated, it's mocked, and it's met with fierce resistance. But don't lose heart. Do not get weary in well-doing. We are the modern line of defense. We are the torchbearers of the American spirit. And 250 years later, the experiment lives on because of us and all of you. We watched. Keep watching the walls. Keep guarding the blueprint. Happy birthday, America, to the greatest nation on God's green earth. God bless America. Till next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.